Hi, my name is Jeff Pagano, and welcome to the Harpin On Rugby podcast. Joining me this week is someone making their 71st pod appearance. Welcome back to Mr. Connor Cronin.
Good to be back. Good to be talking about a win this time out as well. So
I
looking
know
forward
there
to
haven't
that.
been a whole lot of those this season on these pods, unfortunately. But yeah, indeed. So let's turn our attention to that feature match of the week. Here's a generic 80-word summary of the match. Ireland kicked off their Quilter Nation series with a 41-10 win over Japan at Aviva Stadium. Tommy O'Brien marked his first home cap with a try and player of the match honours, while Tom Farrell impressed on debut. Jack Crowley opened the scoring before Nick Timoney, Andrew Porter, Gus McCarthy, Paddy McCarthy, and O'Brien all crossed. Japan showed flair but lacked finishing precision. Ireland's bench added impact, and Sam Prendergast converted 3 second-half tries. The hosts bounced back from last week's loss, blending debut energy with clinical execution. Now, obviously, we'll go into a bit more detail than that. And to kick things off, Connor wants to go a bit retro when it comes to our rap pods and harp on the match one half at a time. And to be fair, it was kind of a test of two halves, with things certainly not looking good after the opening 40 minutes.
Yeah, I mean your generic 80-word summary there uses the word clinical. Not a word I would use for the first 40 minutes of that game of rugby. Um, it's funny, you come into any game and there is always going to be a little bit of hangover from the previous game. Whether that is, we've come in from the previous game's win and we're really positive and we're buzzing off that, or in a match like this, we're coming off the back of a loss and now we have things to prove, and we have, we're a different team to the one named last week, and some of us, this is our opportunity to put our hands up and say we want to be there for other games as well. I'm going to say that there's not many people covered themselves in glory in that first half in particular. I think the headspace of coming in off a loss it's challenging to deal with. But when I started taking some notes on the game, having a rewatch earlier, and literally I just ended up splitting the page down the middle to look at what was good and what was bad for both teams. And I think in the first maybe 10 minutes or so, you could say that Japan came at us with a plan. They had a desire to do particular things and to execute those things in such a way to cause us problems. And when you look throughout the game at the aerial battle, that is something we should be winning every time. Donal Lenihan, in all his talk about South Africa yesterday, GZ Petty cannot wait for the last test of the series to be on comms for that. I'm just talking about South Africa for 80 minutes. But in all his talk about South Africa, also mentioned Kildare and the fact that there was, is it 5 players had come from Kildare in the starting 15. And the Gaelic football background was what he was trying to get at. We should be winning aerial battles all over the pitch, not just because there's so many of the players who've got that experience of jumping for a high ball in Gaelic, and we utterly failed at that throughout the first half. I just kept seeing these moments where Japanese players were getting up ahead of us. I think our defense in the first half was poor. I don't know what I didn't go looking at stats for this. I didn't go looking to see how many defenders did they beat. But they had a very clear plan to pull in defenders with these really direct runners. They were just coming from a little bit deep and coming in hard and running at us, meaning it was taking a couple of players. And then there's a third player kind of saying, well, I'll have a look at this ruck as well and see what I can do with it. And suddenly we've got 3 players in a ruck, and that's creating space where, because they're going round the corner a lot, or maybe out to a pod and then one more passing in again. So that they're constantly pulling the defence narrower and narrower and narrower and creating a lot of space out wide. There's a couple of opportunities they created in that first half going out wide. One got called back for a forward pass. One where we got lucky that the winger kind of looked and said, "Oh, player, I better pass this." and when he did pass, was passing it to a slightly slower player and giving a bit more room for some of our backs to get back and try and make the tackle. But, they clearly had a plan. They weren't necessarily able to execute it, I think, the way they might have wanted to, but they were pulling us in and in and in and then looking for the space out wide. When you look at just their overall aggression for the game, Japan really seemed to be up for it. They wanted to come out and have a proper game. They thought, here's a scalp we could possibly take. Now, I know they've got Wales next week, so maybe that's part of their mentality as well, where they're saying, no matter what happens this week, if we show what we can do a little bit this week, we'll have all the confidence to go forward for it next week as well. And we can talk more about that afterwards if we want. But I just felt in general, Japan, they were really, really strong in what they were doing. They had a plan, they had structure, and things were going well for them. I mean, there's one bit where we'd no pillar at one point, and suddenly you've got a big lad, one of their biggest lads is suddenly bursting through because that's what he's been told to look for. And like I say, when I looked at our sort of pros and cons in the first half, it takes us 2.5 minutes or a bit more, or nearly 3 minutes actually, to get to what I think is the first real positive when we get a turnover at 2 minutes and 50 seconds. And yes, we also got the first score. And yes, we scored 17 points in that first half. But sloppy hands, forward passes, what seemed like panicked decisions maybe, or poor decisions certainly. Why are you making that pass? Did you actually look to see if that was a good pass to make, or did you just panic with the ball? You're looking at players who are failing to stick a defender. You want a defender to commit before you pass. And if you're passing and there's 5 or 6 meters between you and the defender, you're just giving that defender room to go running out to the fella you passed to. I felt that happened a lot throughout the game. I don't even want to go into the line out. I really don't. I think, and there's people saying, well, it's. I
don't think the Irish forwards did either.
Oh yeah, I mean, geez, it was painful to watch because there are those saying, well, it's the caller's fault. And then there's other people saying, no, it's the lifter's fault. And somebody else saying, no, it's the thrower's fault. And somebody had to take ownership of it. Someone had to turn around and say, and, the bit of talk there was afterwards, Doris said, oh, well, it got very loud in there. Did it? I don't think there was the atmosphere for it to get loud, particularly not at the beginning of the game. And Comms said that as well at the time, that there wasn't enough. They didn't think there was enough atmosphere for the volume to be causing the problem. I think it's just bad communication or the wrong calls being communicated when there was good communication. But the line-out was an absolute mess. I mean, God forbid we should have a line-out expert like Paul O'Connell in our coaching staff to try and help fix that. But it's the second week in a row that's going on. On the flip side of that, I will say it was great to see that we constantly were trying to put pressure on their line-out. Baird has become a bit of a menace, jumping at 2. Throughout that game, he was up for a lot of their lineouts to just make it hard for them, and it's something we always said about Peter O'Mahony, that he'd be thrown up at 2 and he'd be creating difficulty and problems for players for hookers trying to get the ball in, and it's nice to see Ryan Baird has taken that lesson and learned about it. But look, I just think the tries we got in the first half, they're a decent couple of tries, because those are moments where we are creating space and we're doing what Japan had been doing to us. We're pulling in defenders, we're creating space. Nick Timoney definitely had the gas to get going there and get across to. I mean, he had a lot of running to do to make sure that score happened. Crowley did himself the good favour that when he took the ball, he looked to see how far infield can I get. Let's make this conversion easy. Let's keep the confidence high by doing that. But I think too many mistakes, too sloppy, definitely too many penalties. And I'll give Stockdale a little bit of leeway on his yellow card because the height difference is extraordinary there. He's got 9 or 10 inches on the guy, and he is always trying to get down, but he does make head contact. So it is definitely a yellow card. I don't think it even needed to go to the bunker. I think the referee could have mitigated that himself. That's a discussion for another day. But it just seemed like a sloppy and poor first half where not enough players were saying that they wanted to play next week against Australia.
Yeah, it was a frustrating first half, particularly after last week. I mean, we were saying in our preview how a bit like the Zebra game for Leinster recently, and the Zebra game back in May. There wasn't a whole lot Ireland could do positively to sort of put that behind us, but obviously there was a lot they could do wrong, and from the first line out going awry and taking so long to get on, to get the first try. I mean, you could look even on those two tries, they were great finishes, definitely, but you could be glass half empty as well on those two finishes because the first one. We didn't get the first try until we had the extra man. And the second try, you were talking about sloppy hands. It took a dropped ball to create the kind of the confusion and for Ryan to get the offload and Timoney to power through. Now, it was a great finish. And Timoney's try scoring record for Ireland is phenomenal. He's played like 5 tests in 5 years and got 5 tries or something like that. But it was a great finish. But overall, we came out of that halftime. And I mean, I usually try to put a positive spin in it, but I couldn't, because it was the following on from last week, and the systems weren't working, the systems weren't operating. That line out, I think the double pump one, I think, was the most frustrating because that shows a complete and it's not totally Ronan Kelleher's fault either. It's the call goes in and they should have done this 1,000 times in training. They know what to do. They should know what but it was the double pump suggests a misunderstanding of who's going where. I mean, he obviously didn't see in front of him what he expected to see, which is why he held it back. And I'm not trying to take all the blame off of him either, but it's the overall systems that's not working there. And but again, I think you were right to talk about Japan positively. They were keen to set. It was the tempo they were setting. I think that was most impressive. Yeah. If they show that against Wales next week, they've got a really good chance of I don't even know if you could call it an upset at this stage, but it was the relentless taking quick throws, picking up and spotting a lack of a pillar at a ruck and little things like that, and just going quickly at us, and we not trying not to allow our defense to settle, because once it did, it actually, our defense was doing pretty well, and we'll talk about how the second half went later, but it was a real challenge, and it was struggling with it. I know it's not the first team. You could look at things like got Craig Casey, he's back from injury. I mean, he's a quality player that usually make things happen. You'd expect him and Crowley to be a perfect pairing, for Ireland, having played so much together. But like I say, he is coming back from injury. So, and there was a couple of positions that weren't as they usually were, but still, you just got that feeling at halftime that it was. They used the word undercooked last week in Chicago, even before a ball was kicked. But there was still that impression that's what we were going into the break.
Yeah, and Jamie Heaslip after the match saying, "Oh, you can't blame a Lions tour, and they're professional rugby players. They should be ready to play whenever they're called upon." But some of the players, they haven't played. That 15 has that 15 ever played together? There is that sense that they're not together all the time. They're not working together. They don't necessarily know. They haven't got that inside track where when I do this, he'll do that. And if I don't do this, he's going to do that instead. And I can rely on that and depend on that. And they don't have that comfort with each other. And definitely players who are only coming back and playing their first minute today was their 40th minute of rugby this season sort of thing. You can't suggest that those players are are ready to go immediately. And I think it is unfair of Heaslip to suggest that, because you naturally come off the end of that big long season tired, and then you don't do anything until you get back into preseason, and then, you know, 2, maybe 3 games for some of these people. I wouldn't even, I would count that as Tadburn's second game. I wouldn't count the 3 minutes he was on last week as anything. So you can't expect them to be at the same level they are when they're consistently doing the same things. You know, the repetition and getting into the mindset in a way that you do by playing repeat games. But they need more games. They need more time in the legs to be that together that we need them to be.
Well, elsewhere in the November series, a bit like the Aviva, the theme for the weekend seemed to be results that looked like they were going one way before ending up going very much the other. Scotland kept the All Blacks close before continuing their long losing streak against them. Fiji led after half an hour before England ran away to a 20-point margin. Australia led at halftime before the Italians did the Northern Hemisphere proud by overcoming Ireland's next opponents. And on Sunday, Wales had the Pumas at 14-all in Steve Tandy's debut as coach before falling to a 50-burger. And last but not least, in the marquee matchup of the round, the Springboks shrugged off a Lou de Jager straight red to outplay Six Nations champions France by almost double scores. Also, in Spain, you had Ireland posting 60 points in their match. There was an Ireland 15. We're going to talk about that a bit later. But for now, we're going to return to the Aviva on Saturday. And Connor now is going to have a look at how Ireland improved after the break.
Yeah, when he was asked about the second half, Andy Farrell was asked, that second half was much better. What went different? What did you do? And he said, well, the talk we had clearly worked. And for talk we had, you've got to read full-on hairdryer treatment. They must have been devoured by him and the rest of the coaching staff. And I get the feeling Andy's not the type to shout at everybody. I get the feeling he'd have done that thing that all teenagers hate, where he goes really, really quiet and then just says something like, I'm so disappointed in you. Because you just feel like he's looking at that, and he will be annoyed. He'll be annoyed at so many of the mistakes, and then tell them, you are better than that. Now you have to go out and prove it. And I'd say he said stronger words thrown in there as well. But the difference it made, I think that the defence became much, much tidier. I didn't feel at any point that our line was being particularly threatened. No matter what the opportunity was, I think, and they had a couple of opportunities where they were making territory and they were making ground towards us. Yeah, we were still a bit sloppy. Yeah, we were still, and I'm gonna put that bit down to cohesion at that stage. We're at a point now where it's just a little bit of, the scrum half doesn't know I want to run that kind of line in this situation, or the why did he take that into contact when I was open and available, or whatever it is. And it's just a cohesion thing, I think, in the second half, because everything else just seemed to be a lot tidier. We've got 3 really well taken tries. I think Porter, good awareness of the line for Porter to know how close he was to be able to reach out and place it. I've been tackled this close, but I know I'm allowed one movement, and places it well to take that try. I think to see Paddy McCarthy in only his second match for Ireland, getting himself a try, and I think it's brilliant. It's such a positive, mindset thing for any player, that he'll be able to go home and talk to Joe, which is not a Lifeline reference, but talk to Joe about the buzz of it and the excitement of being in that position. And again, like, he's only on his second cap. Like, a lot of people questioned his presence in the squad. The fact that he got chosen ahead of Boyle last week says lots, because I would have assumed Boyle was the natural first choice behind Andrew Porter. but he's got the nod twice now. So that raises a few eyebrows, I'm sure. And I know especially there are other parts of country where his selection will have raised eyebrows. I'm hopeful that people are looking and saying, well, do you know what? Yeah, he's doing all right. He's holding his own in the scrum. He's playing positively and taking the ball into contact and whatever else he's doing. So, and then Tommy O'Brien's try. I don't think I can say enough good about Tommy O'Brien from, particularly from the second half. Yeah, he had a few moments in the first half, as did everyone. I think at the start of the second half, did they say that Craig Casey was the only player with no missed tackles by the time we got to the start of the second half? But I think O'Brien in the second half played really, really well. He just took a really good read of what Prendergast was doing to get the ball for his try. And at that stage, he'd earned a try. He'd been putting the work in. Between a turnover at 2 minutes and 50 seconds, and I mentioned that from the bit of chat in the first half, and to then get on, and he's hugely responsible for that try. You know, he makes a tackle, then he makes a pass to Prendergast, and then he runs the line that makes sure that the ball can be passed again. He was, I think, very deserving of a man of the match, or player of the match. Sorry. At that stage, and not that there weren't other players who could have been in contention, but I just think the whole second half, things just clicked a little bit better. I think Casey played better off the back of Rooks. I think he was more present, more aware, looking around a bit better. I think that there are definitely people who will say, well, you know, if Jack Crowley had still been on at that stage when the Japanese legs were getting tired, he would have done things like that too. I'm not suggesting he wouldn't. I'm saying Sam came on at a time that was good for him and good for his headspace, good opportunity for him to have some really positive play for half an hour so that he goes into camp this week saying, you know what, yeah, I did a good job today, and reduce the number of questions that there are around whether he's got the ability at this level or not. It's not going to eliminate them. There are definitely people going to give out about it. But I think he had a very good game when he came on. I've seen a lot of people say Jack Crowley had a very bad game. I think those people are wrong. Did he play to the absolute best of his ability? Probably not. You compare it to how he played against Leinster in the Munster game. I think he played much better that day than he did yesterday. But that's not saying he had a terrible game. That's just saying that if he sets himself a standard, I'm presuming he's going to want to push himself to that standard all the time. And I don't think in the first 10 minutes of the second half he did. But again, that's not to say he had a bad game. I think it's just kind of how the match was going at that point. But I think all round, that second half just seemed to be a sense where more things were clicking, more things were together. I will say that in comparison, so somebody suggested that the way, I know Keno has called rugby an arms race a few times, and Rich Massoud has done the same, where, it's an arms race. You're trying to be better all the time. I've seen in another chat I'm in the suggestion that perhaps our tactics are they've been a bit figured out at this stage. What are we going to do to up the game? How are we going to get better? But I think coming away with the win yesterday was really important. It all but guarantees our place in the top going into the World Cup draw. And, say the second half, if you want to see Ireland playing well, you just ignore the first half and go straight to the second half.
Yeah. I mean, there's a definite improvement, and I'd say it was the hairdryer treatment at halftime that inspired them. What you're saying about the arms race is interesting, because I think that ties into what you were saying from the first half about the high ball. We on the one hand, we should be doing better with them. But for me, I think in general, in the game of rugby, I think there's too much reliance on the high ball anyway. I mean, you go back to when, it's just a personal opinion. You go back to when Joe Schmidt sort of brought it in as an attack option, as opposed to there's nothing else happening, just put it up and have a lottery. He had this thing where, no, if you put it up and time your the chase lines right, you can get the ball back, and that could be a way of advancing the ball up the pitch, and that's great. But that was over 10 years ago, and like you say, defense coaches have worked on ways the other way, and it's going that ways, and it's kind of coming back to a lottery again. Plus, you got the whole another version of a lottery is the whole option of possibility of collisions in the air and all that, Marky. I'm just thinking personally, maybe if they do it 70% of the time, maybe bring that down to 50% of the time and try to find more options of getting through. That's just my personal opinion on that. But I think the second half showed as well what we were saying about the lineup. And I pretty certain that all of Ireland's tries came after lineouts, and that worked. And it just shows that if we can just get that simple set piece right, they do have a game. They do have plans. They do have moves in place. It happened against New Zealand as well. That try the try that we did get, there was 2 lineouts in a row, and boom, everything clicked into place. They had a game to go to that was working. That does seem to be more innovative, different kinds of offloads, slightly different patterns, different looks. But if you don't have a lineout, if you don't have the platform, you don't have the ball, it's not going to happen, So there was that. Also in the second half, unfortunately, we saw Jamie Osborne going off. That look, it seemed kind of innocuous. It was a clear out. Now maybe he'd already done it. Maybe he already had something wrong at this point. But there was one ruck where 2 Japanese hit him, and I'm not saying this was illegal. There was anything wrong with it. They just both got him. The way and the way he fell, he just wasn't right after it. And when you see him going off holding it, and it's a dislocated shoulder, that's not good, and not good for him. Obviously, not good for Ireland. With Hugo already out, they're going to have to find other options at 15. But there's that as well. And then Sam. Now, like you say, you could say that Jack would have played the same. That's fine, but we need 2 out halves. This is the whole point. You can go the Leinster-Munster thing all we want, but the fact of the matter is we want at least 2 out halves that can take us through the 80 minutes. And Sam been low on confidence. He needed a performance like this. He was putting in great touch finders. His kicking game has improved. His confidence, that reverse pass to Tommy O'Brien to put him through for his try.
That reverse pass. If I could have found a gif of, I don't know, for anyone who watches South Park, that bit where Stan's dad, Randy, after the internet has gone down, and there was a ghost, I swear, and people will know the gif I'm talking about. That's what that was. That was absolutely
beautiful. Brilliant. It's great to see. It do him the world of good going into these big matches we've got coming up. So overall, They got the job done. It was the scoreline who looked a lot more like the scoreline we were expecting. I think the commentators were kind of saying afterwards that Japan were unlucky, that maybe they deserved a few more points. That's fine in itself, but let Japan worry about Japan. We got our side of things, and the team get together. They sorted out the problems at halftime, got the result, and hopefully the full squad for the next week game can hit their straps a lot earlier. We had the another game in Spain as well. There was the Ireland 15 played a match in Spain. They racked up a good score. It was an interesting lineup, interesting team. What did you make of it?
Yeah, very mixed kind of team. A lot of players where some of those players you'd be looking and saying, oh, maybe they want to be in the bigger picture going forward and all these kinds of things, and they'll get their opportunities as they go. But I think when you look at that game, some of the players that really stood out for me, and in fact, I'll probably just name one, Harry Byrne. Harry Byrne was at the centre of everything that went well in that game. And that is not me trying to be blue-goggled or Leinster-centric. This is not Dublin media talking here. This is just somebody who watched the game and thought, for all the questions and concerns we've had about out-halves for years, where it's like, we've got a guy, but if he goes down, we got nobody else. So who else do we have? Um, it was great to see him playing so well. And I was like, he's not alone. A lot of players really stood up. A lot of players put their hand up and said, I want my opportunities going forward. And I think, will cause, particularly over the next couple of years, like Postlethwaite, I think he had a great game as well. I think he really did a lot of good for himself and his standings in that centre's pecking order. I think from a front row perspective, Milne had a decent game. Lee Barron, when he came on, Tom Stewart had a good game. I think in the hookers lineup, he's gonna again have done himself some favors. But absolute standout player of the match for me was Harry Byrne. The very dodgy rugby pass commentator who I think may not have a lot of experience of commentating on rugby. I don't know. But there was a point where he said, that is however many assists at this stage for Harry Byrne, because he was picking his passes well. He was picking who to, not just who to pass, but how to pass. How far out am I going? Am I going past three players to give a player space? What am I doing here? I think he did a great game, and I think I'll give a shout out to Ben Murphy as well. I think he had a really good run out at scrum half and is going to pose some selection problems in the years to come.
Yeah, and another nod to that commentator. Don't forget there was also 2 tries for Robert Balukown. That was
when Peter Ustinov came on.
Yeah,
that was
it was. I know. I can't really talk about American accents myself, but it was nails in a chalkboard. Surely to God, they could have found someone else. Saying Rugby Pass is owned by World Rugby, isn't it? So surely they've got a little more access to a wider range of commentators. But he wasn't even in Madrid for the game. But anyway, listen,
watching online.
Yeah, he was watching.
Same as me.
He's in his pajamas, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so listen, just going back to our match real quickly, we had a couple of comments on our Facebook page. We had Steve O. Fitzgerald, who said a win was satisfying in the end. To change the whole squad near enough and not be a million miles away is success in my eyes. Bert McLaughlin said very poor first half. First half, second half was better when Prendergast, Conan, and Cian Prendergast came on the field. If you want to get involved in the conversation, head over to our Facebook page after the full-time whistle in Leinster and Ireland matches. Okay, listen, we're going to leave it there for now. Many thanks to Conor for joining us. Looking forward to having you back on again soon.
Thanks a million.
And as ever, be sure to stay tuned to Harpin On Rugby on all the socials during the week, starting with our bonus chat posting on YouTube Tuesday, where we'll be harping on how Ireland's current squad looks compared to the others we've seen so far this November. Then on our 80 plus column, where we try to look at the wider rugby world, that posts every Wednesday over on Substack. In the meantime, stay safe, everyone. Slán.